There are evenings in life that feel heavier than others, not because of noise, not because of crisis, but because the air itself seems to carry memory. This is one of those evenings. It was early winter, the kind that arrives quietly, with thin snow drifting under streetlights and settling on coat sleeves before you even notice. Cars moved slowly along the road, their headlights soft and blurred through falling flakes. Inside a warm sedan, Daniel Whitaker sat in the back seat, staring out the window. Daniel was 58 years old. His hair, once dark and thick, was now brushed neatly to the side, streaked with gray at the temples. His jawline still carried the sharp confidence of his younger years, but his eyes had softened. They were the eyes of a man who had built towers of glass and steel, who had signed contracts worth more than he once earned in a lifetime, and yet who had quietly lost things that no money could buy back. He wore a navy wool coat over a tailored suit. A silk tie rested perfectly against his shirt. He had just left a board meeting. Another expansion, another acquisition, applause, handshakes, polite admiration. And yet, as the car passed a small neighborhood park, something caught his attention. "Stop the car," he said gently. The driver slowed. Through the window, Daniel saw a woman sitting on a wooden bench beneath a flickering street lamp. Snow gathered lightly on her shoulders. Two children sat close to her, bundled in winter coats. The woman was looking down at her phone. Not casually, desperately. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. It was Claire Morgan. He had not spoken her name aloud in nearly 25 years, but in that moment it rose within him like it had never left. Claire looked older, of course. They both did. Her brown hair, once long and carefree, now fell straight against her coat, tucked behind her ears. There were faint lines around her eyes, the kind life writes quietly. But her posture, the way she held her shoulders when trying to stay strong, he would have recognized that anywhere. The boy beside her looked about 8, dark hair, serious eyes, protective in the way little boys can be when they feel responsible too early. The girl, perhaps the same age, leaned into her mother's arm. She had lighter hair, soft features, and eyes that looked tired from the cold. Twins. Daniel felt his heart move in a way it had not moved in years. He stepped out of the car. The cold hit him instantly, sharp and honest. Snow gathered on his coat as he walked toward the bench, slowly, carefully, as though approaching something fragile. Claire looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Time does that sometimes. It pauses, to allow two souls to recognize what they once were. "Daniel," she whispered. He nodded. Up close, he could see exhaustion in her face, not defeat, just weariness, the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. "I didn't expect," she began, then stopped. Neither had he. The boy shifted slightly closer to his mother. "It's all right," Daniel said gently, his voice lower than he remembered. "I'm not here to upset anything." The little girl studied him quietly. Snow gathered on the bench around them. Daniel glanced at Claire's phone in her hands. "I was just—" She hesitated, then gave a small, honest smile. "Trying to find a place for tonight." She did not say it dramatically. She did not ask for pity. She simply told the truth. There are moments in life when pride stands very still and humility speaks instead. Daniel swallowed. "I have a guest house," he said softly. "It's warm. It's empty. You can stay as long as you need." Claire's eyes flickered with hesitation. Memories can complicate generosity. "We'll manage," she said instinctively. He nodded slowly. "I know you will," he replied. "You always did." The wind shifted. The little girl shivered. Daniel knelt slightly so he was eye level with the twins. "Hi," he said warmly. "I'm Daniel." The boy studied him carefully. "I'm Noah," he said. "This is Emma." They were polite, well-raised. Claire looked at them with quiet pride. Daniel smiled gently. "It's too cold to sit out here much longer." Noah glanced at his mother. Emma pressed closer to her side. Claire closed her eyes briefly, the way people do when they are making peace with something difficult. "Just for tonight," she said finally. Daniel nodded. "Just for tonight." The drive was quiet. The guest house sat behind Daniel's main home, not extravagant but comfortable. Soft lights glowed in the windows. Inside there were blankets, warm rugs, a small fireplace. Emma walked in first, her breath catching slightly at the warmth. Noah stood tall, observant, protective. Claire removed her coat slowly. Daniel gave them space. He asked his housekeeper to prepare hot soup and tea. Nothing fancy, just something warm. They sat at the small wooden table. Steam rose from their bowls. For a few minutes there were no explanations, just the simple sound of spoons against ceramic. It felt strangely familiar. Years ago, before ambition had stretched too far, Daniel and Claire had once shared a tiny apartment. They had eaten simple meals at a scratched kitchen table. They had laughed easily then. "I didn't know," Daniel said quietly after the children had begun to relax. Claire nodded. "Life doesn't always follow the plan we make at 25. He smiled faintly. "No, it doesn't," she explained gently. "A business that failed, medical bills, a landlord who sold the building, no family nearby, just a series of small setbacks that added up. Not tragedy, just life." Daniel listened, truly listened. He looked at the twins again. "They're beautiful," he said. Claire's eyes softened. "They're good kids." He hesitated only briefly. "They're mine, aren't they?" The question was not accusatory, it was tender. Claire held his gaze. "Yes," she said softly. The room did not explode with shock. There was no dramatic gasp, just a quiet settling of truth. Daniel leaned back slowly. Noah looked between them. Emma watched her mother. Daniel nodded once. "I wish I had known," he said. Claire's voice did not tremble. "You were building an empire. I didn't want to be something that held you back." He looked around the warm room. "I would have traded some of it," he admitted quietly. Silence again. But this time it felt healing. That night, after the children fell asleep under thick blankets, Daniel stood by the fireplace while Claire wrapped her hands around a mug of tea. "I can't change the past," he said gently, "but I can show up now." Claire studied him carefully. People in their 50s understand something younger hearts do not. That love is not always fireworks. Sometimes it is simply showing up. "What does that mean?" she asked softly. "It means you won't sit on a cold bench again," he replied. "It means Noah and Emma will know their father, if you'll allow it." Claire's eyes filled, not with regret but with relief. "You're different," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "So are you." He had built companies. He had negotiated contracts across continents. But standing there, offering steady presence instead of grand gestures, felt like the most honest success of his life. Over the following weeks, the guest house remained warm. Daniel helped enroll the twins in a nearby school. He attended parent meetings quietly. He listened to Noah talk about science. He let Emma braid the thinning gray at his temples and laughed when she called him snow hair. He did not try to buy their affection. He earned it. Claire found part-time work. She regained her footing slowly. Pride returned, not defensive, but healthy. And sometimes in the evenings the four of them would sit together by the fire. No boardrooms, no contracts, just simple conversation. One night, as snow fell again outside the window, Daniel realized something. The park bench had not been a scene of tragedy. It had been an invitation to return to the part of himself that once believed success meant building something with someone, not above them. Claire caught his eye across the room. They did not rush into promises. At their age, they understood that love grows best when it is given space. But there was warmth, and forgiveness, and gratitude. And on quiet winter evenings, when the wind pressed softly against the windows, Daniel would sometimes think back to that moment in the car. If he had not looked up, if he had not asked the driver to stop, life can change that gently, not with noise, but with a decision to step out into the cold and walk toward someone you once loved. And perhaps that is the lesson for those of us who have lived long enough to know better. Kindness is rarely dramatic. It is often inconvenient. Sometimes it requires humility. But when offered sincerely, it has the power to warm more than a room. It warms the years that remain. And in the end, that may be the richest gift of all.